You are listening to Peak One Sports.
Welcome to the Sports Biz. I am your host, Tony Nix. As you can see, joined here today by Ashton at Ashton_Nix. How's it going, Ashton?
Well, based on Cowboys game, which we'll talk about here, it's going as good as it can, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to jump on here the day after a embarrassing, abysmal loss by the Cowboys. I think I'm still quite honestly in shock, as most Cowboy fans are. I can't even find the right words at this time to even let my feelings out. And maybe this is what the Cowboys did, is I kind of just thought this, didn't even think much about the Packers. You know, earlier in the week or on Saturday morning, you and I talked about some of these matchups and kind of our predictions. I mean, we were talking about who do the Cowboys face next? How do these matchups work for where the Cowboys are going to get in the second round? There was no question in my mind that the Cowboys would not be moving on to play again next week.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe because it was the Packers, it was just kind of in the back of my mind, like maybe some sort of PTSD or something from past years. Same thing when you play the 49ers. And I don't know. I would have felt more confident if it was any other team, not based on accolades or talent or anything, just because it's not the Packers.
Yeah. I mean, the Packers struggled this season. This was not a great Packers team coming into this week, you thought. I would say for sure that's probably the best performance I've seen from the Packers this season. Jordan Love just hasn't been this type of quarterback. You know, he's very consistent, did a really good job in the pocket. He was getting some pressure, but he was moving around very well in the pocket, much like another Green Bay quarterback we've seen in, previous years of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. For sure. The Cowboys just made him look great. And, I don't know. I mean, we'll get more into defensive schemes and everything. And you were expecting Aaron Jones to run all over you, but it was very Aaron Rodgers-esque the way he was making throws. It wasn't just like they couldn't get any pressure or anything like that. They were almost on him every time. It was like every single throw he was throwing, Cowboys were half a second late. And it reminded me of that the 2016 when the Packers came to Dallas for the divisional round, and the Cowboys played pretty well on defense, and they'd get him to third down, and then Aaron Rodgers would, make an incredible throw off his back foot or over to the side, and then they would catch it and get their toes down in bounds or something. It's just so close. Until later in the second quarter and even in the second half, it was before it got out of hand. It was just the defense wasn't playing horrible. They were getting him to third down. They just couldn't get him off and then they were getting pressure. And then, after it was 27-0 after the pick six when it all went to hell, and you couldn't, you couldn't even judge what was happening.
Let's dive right into that. Dan Quinn's defense, what happened? You knew Aaron Jones was going to come in and run all over your tail. He's always had historic games against the Cowboys. The Cowboys didn't prepare for that running game. And why? Why you had one job is stop the run, and they didn't do it.
It's funny. I think for the first 3 or 4 runs, they did stop. I think it was 4 runs for -1 yards. It was all in the first drive because they would get him to third down, and then Jordan Love would do. It's weird to say, but I guess it's now what Jordan Love would do. He's really proven himself apparently now. But then it was just later in the drive, you just couldn't stop Aaron Jones. And then, it wasn't like they gave up. They would still stop him on the run in these random plays. It was either we're going to lock down and stop him, or we're going to give up a 30-yard play. It was nothing in between.
And that was the key. There was a couple plays there that the Packers only ran 2 routes. They had 2 receivers go out. They were stacking the box, blocking, doing some in the even our touted secondary couldn't make those plays, those stops with only 2 receivers going out and running routes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it was embarrassing to call this one of the top defenses in the league by that performance. And quite honestly, no matter what Dak's performance was in this game or what the offense did or what McCarthy called, that defense wasn't prepared to play, and that showed, and that lost the game for them. That defense did.
It was everybody's fault. But you saw it later in the second half where they would get a couple of drives together. They kick a field goal. They give up a touchdown. They score a touchdown. They give up another touchdown. And then right there, late third, really early fourth, they couldn't just they couldn't score at all. And it was like 41-16 or something like that. But you saw them like, okay, finally the offense is I think the offense really got on track after that pick six because they got a drive together and it didn't look great. The final drive before halftime and the first drive after halftime, it was still looking like they had slowed down their tempo. They weren't going really fast, which they had plenty of time, but you were like, come on, let's get something going. And they were forcing it to CeeDee Lamb, but they finally got him going. And stat wise, it looked like he had a decent game. If you look back,
Dak
10
was
years,
41 for 60 for 403 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
But he had 0 passing yards in the first quarter.
And
they play prevent defense. It's easy to rack up those points later on, but they finally got something going. Whereas I think they were just a step too. They didn't let, I think Dak and CD were just off when the game started. I don't think they let it naturally process where if they kind of would have, Dak doesn't throw that pick six directly at CeeDee Lamb, staring CeeDee Lamb down. Like they got a couple of passes and you're like, okay, here we go. And he just forces it. And eventually they got on. That's why I'm saying they didn't let the process, go forward or play out because you're like, that's the best. It had been the best quarterback receiver combo in the league. And it just went, it was gone. And it's like, well, it just doesn't happen. They don't suck. They sucked in that game. And you say maybe Dak's not the right quarterback, whatever. But the time has told us that that's a good combo. That's what you want to do. Just let it play out. And I think they forced it too much when I know they were able to come back. They had second stringers in there, young players playing prevent defense. But from a mentality standpoint, 20-0 and 27-0 is completely different because the Cowboys were getting the ball after halftime.
Yeah.
You score a touchdown going 20-7, you're getting the ball right back. You go down, score another touchdown, you're right back in this game, and the mentality's completely shifted. And I was thinking that whole first half was just stay in the game. This is no playoff experience for the most part on this team. There are some veterans on there, but it's a very young team. If you can get them
the youngest team in the playoffs,
and if they have a 20-0 lead and you get back 20-14, suddenly the pressure's on them. And then Dak just stares down CeeDee Lamb, throws it, and, pick six.
With the stat line we see, yes, a lot of these came towards the end of the game. This defense, if they don't give up, they absolutely did not find a way to stop. They did not stop the Packers offense. The Packers offense stopped themselves when they pulled Jordan Love, they pulled Aaron Jones.
The Cowboys offense, the Cowboys offense made adjustments and were able to get into it. They didn't play outstanding in the second half, but they did score 32 points. They had 7 at halftime, so they scored a lot of points. Yes, a lot of prevent, but they were able to, you could have put third string in there, third string defense in there in the first quarter, and Dallas wasn't doing anything.
Yeah,
they finally got it together, made adjustments, but there's no way they were going to be able to keep up with the Packers offense because they scored 27 in the first half, and I'm sorry, they finished with 48, so they scored 21 in the second half. That's a lot. If you're coming back, you can't give up 3 touchdowns.
This really goes back to the defense, though. They had no sacks. They had no turnovers. How do you win a game as this defense? You're going to play this bend and not break. You can only do that so long, and you have to have a turnover. You have to have a sack, and they just weren't doing that.
And that's what they've been doing, where they'll struggle a little bit. Yeah, they'll give up a touchdown. Yes, they'll give up it just won't look great. And then they get a turnover and then everything changes all of a sudden. But in the second half, I was kind of going back and forth. I left the game on in the living room and I was going and doing peak one prep stuff and, social media stuff. And I would keep walking back and forth. I'm like, I'm not just going to sit here through this, but I'm going to leave it on. I'm kind of listening. And when something happens, I'll go in there like, oh, okay. I kid you not. It was in the, third, early fourth quarter. I'd walk away, come back. Green Bay scored. I wasn't gone that long. I walked away. I came back. Green Bay scored again. Where I was thinking, okay, they scored right after. I think they kicked a field goal right after halftime. I'm like, okay, you're getting something going. Get a stop. You just got to play. You just got to play the game, the comeback game. And then I kept coming back. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Dak could turn into what Dak's been all year.
Yeah.
If the defense doesn't stop, and that's, my mentality this whole time was, of course, Dan Quinn's going to come back because he's going to be sitting right there. If Mike McCarthy doesn't take this team to the NFC Championship, he's sitting right there to become, favored to be head coach. But and we'll get into it about Mike McCarthy, but if he gets fired, I don't think Dan Quinn's anywhere near this after giving that up. I don't know if maybe it's overreaction. Do you let one game, but it was a pretty big game.
Well, the sad part of
the
stat line is Jaron Kearse led the team with 5 tackles.
Led with 5 tackles.
Parsons is at the bottom. He had 1 tackle, 1 solo tackle, and 1 assisted tackle.
Yeah,
now, given he was held, and they did finally call getting some holding calls on him.
Early on, he had a lot of pressures. I mean, I don't know it's all arbitrary if he gets credited for the pressures, but he was right in Jordan Love's face most of the time. And then unfortunately the secondary be a guy wide open. And you say, well, you got to get to the quarterback a little bit quicker.
Do we think that this Dan Quinn, I mean, he's done such a good job this year making adjustments, especially halftime adjustments, scheming against teams, scheming to get Parsons in a position to make plays. It just felt like last night he wasn't doing a lot of scheming. That it was just kind of line up and let's just play base defense. You saw him play a lot of zone coverage, which they don't do. They're not a team that likes to play zone. They bring the pressure up front, the front 7, and then they man up outside.
And then
they didn't do that. And then the zone got picked apart.
It did. They just looked lost. And you could see them. I mean, you could see it. Deron Bland was during one play. I mean, I don't know the scheme, so it's hard to say, hey, that's your guy. But Deron Bland noticed no one's going over there. He kind of pointed in the middle of the play as he gets wide open. So you're like, okay, that was either your guy or someone else's guy, but you noticed it. And, maybe I've never played defense played football on the defensive side. So I don't know if you just abandon yours to go after, but you saw that. I saw it with Kearse as well.
Yeah.
I even saw it with Micah when he dropped back into coverage. They were playing zone and he was on a guy for a second and then came back to cover his zone, I guess. I assume it was his zone. I don't know. Maybe Micah was supposed to stay with that guy. It all depends what the defensive side was, and maybe we'll get more information on that throughout this offseason. But they just look lost.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe really the whole game. I mean, on all facets. You and I spoke about it earlier today. That offense, we saw that struggle, and then they did look lost. Dak looked lost. CD looked lost. You could see some frustration between those guys, which you don't tend to see either. And, you don't wonder what was going on there. And then, for me, the whole time I'm watching this game and I'm seeing the way this game's unfolding, and it seemed like these guys didn't have heart, that they weren't prepared for this. I think you even might have said it yesterday when we were talking about it. You have a game plan until you get punched in the mouth. Then what?
Yeah, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
And
that's when you have to. Yeah, that's when you have to. That's why I hated trying to force it to CD Lamb so much, because I'm like, it's gonna come, and it did come. CD Lamb had 10 maybe even more. I just remember seeing 10 catches, 90-something yards. It eventually came, but I don't know that they'd come back from 20-0. Not how that defense was playing, but that pick six, just 27-0 sounds so much worse than 20-0. It's just another touchdown. And I'm not going to go over it again, but like I said, you get back-to-back possessions, ending the first half, beginning the second half, that can change everything. And the offense kind of got it figured out a little bit, maybe a little too late, but
I mean, I would say
defense gave up 48 points.
If the defense could have found a way to make a stop in the second half, I think this is a completely different outcome. This is a different conversation. This is a different show today than the
Yeah.
way it was. But like we mentioned, the defense could not make a stop at all. In no
Till late in
way.
the game when they had backups in.
Yeah, exactly. So
Which I don't even know how it happened because I was walking back and forth and the Cowboys tried to get that onside kick and they didn't. And so I walked away. I was like, game's over. I left it on. I came back and the Cowboys were getting it punted. And like they had one timeout, or they have one timeout, the 2-minute warning, and they were getting the ball back before the 2-minute warning. I'm like, what just happened? But like I don't know, did they throw incompletion? I walked away. It was that quick. So apparently it got to stop pretty good. I don't know. I mean, of course, backup players, but
yeah,
still.
and you had the entire offense damn near was a backup. But
Backup to a subpar team anyways.
exactly. This all to me boils down to watching this all comes down and falls on McCarthy. Mike McCarthy is the sole he's the leader of this. He's the head of this. He was supposed to have all of his guys prepared to play, his coaches prepared to coach, a good offensive game plan, which in an elimination game, all the stops should be pulled out. You should have a plan. You should be prepared that you're going to get the best these guys have because this is it. Everybody's season's on the line. They weren't prepared for that. They were prepared to come in here thinking the Packers were just going to lay down as the number 7 seed facing the number 2 seed, and they weren't going to put up a fight.
Yeah, I'm not sure their mentality. A lot of times we've talked about it before in the past when they played the Bills, and there was a penalty where Zach Martin got in a guy's face, and there's an argument. Do you want that? It cost them. It cost them from getting a field goal, which it may or may not have mattered, but killed the momentum. And I know you said you didn't like that.
Yeah.
You're like, just play the game. So the mentality is, do you want it to be a more significant game for McCarthy because it's the Packers? You're like, well, yeah, of course I do. I want him to have that grit. I want him to have, the guts to do something. But on the other hand, it's like, well, do you just want him to play it like it's another game, not get trapped in that sort of thing? And it seemed like he was just playing as another game. I mean, obviously, he's not quite Jason Garrett. He'll give you some content, but he's not going to be like, yeah, this is an important game because I have to beat my former team. He would never say that anyways. But it seems like he didn't have any want. Like the fact that it was the Packers was irrelevant because I don't think your team plays like that. If it's like your ex-girlfriend or former team or whatever, terminology you want to use, analogy, it just didn't seem like his team played well for him in that situation. I don't want to say they gave up on him because they did make some sort of a comeback, backups in or not. But it was a very weird game that us who watched it years from now are going to be like, yeah, it was a terrible game. And then people will look at it and be like, I mean, it was 48-32. It's a shootout. And it wasn't really – CD Lamb had a really good game. Dak had a pretty good game. And like, no, not if you watch it. Stat-wise, I think looking – it probably would have been better if they just lost 41-16 or 40-16.
Quite honestly, I think the Packers had 2 more touchdowns in them. If they don't pull Aaron Jones and Jordan Love, I think they have 2 more touchdowns in them here. Well, we're talking about a record-setting performance.
It was funny. Score. I liked after they beat Washington, Dak said he wasn't going to put on the NFC Champs hat. He's like, no, we have more to do. Then he shows up to this game wearing what's
Here
his?
We go.
Here we go hat. I'm like, that's kind of, and I know I'm not saying, I mean, Dak's never been that flashy in your face kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why? Why do you do that? It screams overconfidence in this situation. And I'm not going to say like, hey, they just were looking forward like we all were. Because I don't think that's just what they do. I honestly just think you have a game plan until you get punched in the face. And they just and you had a comeback to that was like, yeah, the champs can bob and weave. And yeah, they got hit in the face. They were down 7-0. It looked like crap. You go out. It wasn't a 3-and-out the first round. You got a first down out of it. But then you punt the ball away and then they score again. And then all of a sudden you're down 14-0 in the first quarter. You're like, what the crap? Like, just relax, adjust, and get your offense going. And they just couldn't get their offense going until it was too late, later in the second quarter.
Back to Dak. I mean, Dak has gotten a lot of heat in the past. Stephen A. Smith's one guy that gives Dak a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Dak, and even Stephen A. has admitted that Dak has had a All-Pro MVP season. He really has. He's played phenomenal, played better than anyone expected him to. Now, for the money he's getting paid, absolutely, he should be playing at this level.
And none of it matters.
But to me, that's part of Mike McCarthy not having him ready, not having Dak ready to go. I think Mike McCarthy in his post-game mentioned that it took too long to get some rhythm going, to get his quarterback rhythm, and that was important to get this rhythm. And, for me, that's a cop-out.
Yeah.
Rhythm or not, you're an MVP candidate. You're an MVP quarterback. You should be playing like it, and you should be able to show up like it. But if you don't have a coach that's going to set you up for that, then I think that's a problem. And I think that's where we're at. Dak is a great guy. Dak is an upstanding guy. His character is off the charts, better than anybody else in the league, I would say.
And none of that has ever been in question. The biggest Dak hater won't. I mean, outside of maybe the Philadelphia fans booing him at the Super Bowl when he's getting the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. But yeah, the rhythm was obviously off. I mean, you don't go from being, like I said, the best quarterback receiver duo to nothing. And eventually they got it figured out. I have no idea what it was. It wasn't forcing the ball to him. I think they figured out, what might have been wrong, but you can't. Yeah. I mean, I liked what Dak said when he went up there after the game. Hey, I sucked, but that doesn't help anything. Next year, you could throw 50 touchdowns, no interceptions, be the MVP, all that. Every single person in the world is going to say, okay, that's great. Do it in the playoffs.
But you can't do it in January.
He had, against the Bucs last year, one good playoff game. I can't remember how well he played against the Seahawks, his first playoff win. I know he had that near rushing touchdown that he looked really heroic in. I don't remember his stat line in that game. But he hasn't played all that great outside of one game, which again wasn't a great team.
Let's look back at Mike McCarthy in his history. Outside of the Cowboys, obviously, he was with the Packers. He had Brett Favre and he had Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Mike McCarthy only has one Super Bowl under his belt.
Yeah.
And that's with Aaron Rodgers. So was it Mike McCarthy or was it Aaron Rodgers? Aaron Rodgers is a guy that doesn't really need a coach. I mean, if you've watched him with the Jets, you've watched him on Hard Knocks, he runs that locker room. He runs those offensive meetings. He runs the quarterback room. He's the guy. He doesn't need a coach to get him up for a game.
Yeah. So Dak is a very, very talented bus driver quarterback, but he can't be the guy. He can put up stats, and Mike McCarthy has to be the one. And, Brett Favre was kind of close to that, but it was so far in Brett Favre's career that, he had the confidence, the experience, the wisdom to be able to kind of do that, to make Mike McCarthy look better. In that sense. And then, with Aaron Rodgers ran most of the show. It's always questionable when near the end of Mike McCarthy's tenure with the Packers, he's kind of butting heads with Aaron Rodgers, which comes with the territory. I mean, if you play in the NFL, you kind of have that cocky attitude anyways, where you were a star most of your life if you made it to the NFL, and if you have that kind of talent. So you're kind of like, okay, maybe it's just a bad situation, but it seems like Dak and Mike McCarthy are very talented in their own aspects, but you have to have, they don't have whatever it is to make them elite, I guess, where if Mike McCarthy has an elite quarterback or Dak has an elite coach, that they can make it. Like, I have no doubt that Dak could win a Super Bowl for this team, but it's not going to be because Dak does what Aaron Rodgers does and just carries the team there. And that's what I kind of worried most about this year was, they won 12 games again, but last year they did it. They won 12 games and Dak led the league in interceptions.
Yeah. So
you just had Dak, don't lose the game for us. And now
essentially he just padded his stats this year.
Yeah. And then now he had an outstanding year, but they still went 12-5.
Mm-hmm.
And what seems like an easier schedule. So now you're wondering, like, man, I mean, the defense is good, but the defense isn't carrying them anywhere.
Yeah.
And now you're relying on Dak to do it, which, I mean, hell, I don't know how good he could have played to make up for the defense, but maybe the defense, it's it's all about mentality. Maybe the defense does slightly better, does a little bit better bend and break if the offense gets something going.
Well, you just
Who
expect this
knows?
defense, Dan Quinn's defense, to get takeaways. That's what he's been known for. Back to
Yeah.
the Seattle days. His defenses get takeaways.
That's
That's
the
what you
same thing
expected out of this. I
with
expected the Cowboys to have at least 2 takeaways in this game.
with Deron Bland and Stephon Gilmore. They give up a lot of yards. You'll throw the stats out there. They give up a lot of yards. They do get a lot of turnovers. But that's the thing. You take away those turnovers, then all they're doing is giving up a lot of yards.
Yeah.
And we saw it against Seattle. Deron Bland got burned. He was not good in that game. He got a turnover, and that may have, won the game for them. But it still worries you. You're like,
I think the difference in this game, though, is the Packers didn't torch them like that. It was all broken coverages that they're finding wide open guys that were just left open. It's not like they had anyone that went and, Deron Bland was just getting burned or even was in good coverage and somebody mossed him. Like, they were just leaving guys wide open. The zones were wide open and they were getting 20, 30, 40 yard catches.
It wasn't like they were going for the interception. They just missed. They weren't even close.
Yeah, I would have been better with that.
Players.
Is you see it cut to a receiver and there's not a Cowboy in the screen, in the picture.
Somebody made a point that, man, it looked like they were throwing the game. And I don't, like they compared it to the 1919 White Sox. I don't think they threw the game. That was a different situation. They weren't making money back then. Now these guys are making tons of money. They have all the status in the world, but they played so bad. That's how it kind of looked.
Well, the
body
language of everybody on the team, the sidelines, the body language told the whole story.
I mean, Micah Parsons showing up in a was it Bobby Boucher?
Yeah,
the water boy jersey. Yeah. I'm like, man, that becomes a meme and a legendary picture if you go out and play like him. But that always puts it on like, man, I don't like when they talk the talk like that because they have to live up to, they have to walk the walk, or they just look like idiots.
Yeah.
And not that Mike had a terrible game. Stat wise, it doesn't look great. But he's like 10th or 11th on the list of people to blame right now, but that's not saying much. It's just everybody really screwed up. But yeah, McCarthy, it has to come down on the coach for better or not. If the players just didn't do what they were supposed to, but he's the head of the organization, at least on the field. And, we can talk about Jerry Jones and the blame will come back to Jerry Jones.
He's at least as high as you can go outside of the Jones family.
Yeah, he's like the operations manager. From the operational standpoint, it's his thing. If Deron Bland or whoever, like, this is what happened, I can tell you, like, Dan Quinn can come, and he probably won't, but he could come and say, this is what happened on this play. This is what happened on this play. Well, it's your job to make sure they do that. And then Dan Quinn, Mike McCarthy, it's your job to make sure Dan Quinn
Yeah.
And no. The more frustrating part was at least the offense kind of switched on to a different gear. Not even quite before they put the backups in. They were kind of started to move the ball a little bit better. The defense just made no adjustments. Or maybe they did make adjustments that didn't work.
Yeah. So where do the Cowboys go from here?
I don't want to be one of the overreacting people. I mean, Mike McCarthy has won have gotten you 3 straight 12-win seasons. Hasn't happened in a long time for the Cowboys. Blah, 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 blah. But you can go back to 3 Tom Landry years and find some rough years too. But I think at this point, I can't find a reason to stick with him. You can say, hey, because we'll talk about should you get rid of Dak, and it just doesn't make sense. We can go over that later if you want, but you don't want to get rid of Dak and start over because this team is in a window where they have a lot of talent.
Yeah.
If you switch quarterbacks, if you get lucky and get a CJ Stroud or something like that, which he was the number 2 overall pick. So,
well, I mean,
good luck with that. But if you can switch Mike McCarthy for the same reason because they're in a window, switching the coach can flip it in another year if you get the right guy. It's not like
Let's
starting over.
let's go ahead and eliminate that. I mean, you're not doing anything with Dak at least this next season. You're stuck with
No,
Dak for one more season regardless. It's a
if you don't
$59
extend his
million cap hit.
if you don't extend his contract, which they will unless they just want to blow it up, you're not competing for 3 or 4 years because you won't have the cap room if you don't extend him.
Yeah.
If he plays, it's $59.4 million. They'll extend it. They'll extend him so that cap number gets down, so you can play. So you can pay CeeDee Lamb, so you can pay Micah Parsons, whatever. If you just cut him, I don't know what his dead cap is, but it's probably like 40 something million. It's ridiculous where you could say, well, we're not paying him 59 million, but you get rid of 40 something million, and then you guarantee yourself you have to have a rookie quarterback next year. If you hit, great, but the chances of you're not going to be able to go out and get, say you're, retreaded old star quarterback from whatever that may sign for $1 million.
You can win with Dak Prescott. The Cowboys can win with Dak Prescott. He's still an elite quarterback. He's still a top 5 quarterback in the league now. I mean, even
say
after
what you want about the playoffs. Yeah, you can say he's a bad quarterback in the playoffs. Well, but you can't. That's just something you say. You have to figure out. Maybe that's the coach's job, Mike McCarthy. Figure out, well, why is he playing so good during the regular season? And even last year, he led the league in receptions, but he still played really well. What's the difference? You can't just say he's just not a good playoff quarterback. That's not, unless it's just the pressure's getting into him, because really there's no difference between preseason, regular season, playoffs, except all your mentality and, your intensity. That's the only difference, because everybody's still showing up to a game. You're just saying, hey, this is a playoff game. Winner moves on, loser. So you can't say Dak's not a great, if his contract was up, sure, I'd say, let's look at what can you do? But it just handicaps you so bad where if you want to get rid of Dak, you can get rid of Dak, but you're throwing this team down the drain where even the defense, what they did against the Packers, what they did yesterday, it's still a good defense. You just have to retool some things.
Yeah.
You still have CeeDee Lamb in his prime, Micah Parsons in his prime. If you go down this road, you have to reset the cap with a new quarterback in probably a few years. And by then, CeeDee Lamb's making probably $25 million. Micah Parsons making over $20 million. You have a window here where, I don't know, whatever you want to do, you still have that talent. One way or the other, the Cowboys just got caught with their pants down. They should have won that game. And no matter who they played in the second round, they would have been favored in that game. And then who knows when you go play the 49ers. That's most teams outside of the 49ers, outside of the Ravens, where there's only 1 or 2 favorites to go to the Super Bowl. There's only 2 favorites on each side to go to the Super Bowl. The Cowboys were in the same boat as everybody else. If not, they were obviously a lot better than the number 2 seed and favored in most of those games. But if you look at the Browns, the Texans, the Rams, who, just lost the Lions, even, they have to have some things happen. You want to be in this position. They didn't luck out and get the number 2 seed. They played really well most of this year. And even there were some games where you're like, what the hell happened? If those games changed, if the Cardinals or the Bills or something goes a different way, you have a bye week, So you're right in the position you would have paid. You would have given up an arm, a limb to be in that position if you at the beginning of the season. So it doesn't make sense just throw it all away now, because you're not in cap hell. You're not, you have a window to make this work. And that's why I think Mike McCarthy doesn't make you say you have to keep him because of that reason. I don't know that Bill Belichick necessarily does, because Bill Belichick's kind of in that same boat you were talking about with, is it Aaron Rodgers? Was it Tom Brady, or is it Bill Belichick? Because without Tom Brady, he hadn't been able to do anything. But Bill Belichick's a defensive-minded guy. Maybe he can tell you, hey, dude, this is what, Dak struggled against the Patriots most, outside of this year, where Bill Belichick can give you some insight on Dak, from somebody who played against him, for somebody who schemed against him.
Yeah. Well, that's what we saw in most situations. Even the Lions win. Pretty much everyone was saying Mike McCarthy was out-coached in that game. The Cowboys just didn't, lucked out, which I don't think it was luck. I think, a lot of things would have changed. We're not going to get into the details of...
Yeah, I can't remember a time where people are like, that was Mike McCarthy's the reason you won that game.
Yeah.
He lucked out and threw a challenge flag when he played for the Pack or when he coached the Packers that threw the Des Bryant catch no catch. And he probably looked like a genius in the eyes of Packers fans, but really it was desperation. Like, I don't know what to do. Throw the challenge flag and see what happens.
Yeah.
And he just happened to where the ball grazed the ground.
And then if you look across, I mean, who they were, the Cowboys would have matched up with going forward, between the Lions, I mean, possibly even the Eagles, the Bucks, the Niners. I mean, matchup wise, yes, the Cowboys could have been favored. Coaching wise, I think Mike McCarthy was outmatched, would be outmatched in every game, just like that they showed last night with the Packers. He was outcoached. His team was prepared to play. The Packers team was prepared to play. The Cowboys weren't.
And what seemed to happen with him in Green Bay was the game was kind of evolving metrics, analytics, and he wasn't really going with that. And you can see with how all the young coaches nowadays having success that trend's moving, and he takes a year off. He says he did all this research, all this studying. Not a lot has necessarily changed the way he's done things. I'll give him, he's one of those talented coaches as well, but I think the offense seemed to get better with him calling the plays, but it's getting better than, I mean, they were the number one offense last year too with Kellen Moore. I don't know that it's Kellen Moore was kind of the thing. It's something you had to do.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just get a fresh voice in here. Let's figure something out. And I think that's kind of where you're at now, where, yeah, you've had a lot of success, but you can't seem to get over the hump. You were opposite than Jason Garrett, because Jason Garrett only had a couple of seasons that good. Whereas outside of your first year where Dak gets hurt, but you make the playoffs 3 straight years, and that's great. Hats off to you. It hasn't been done in a long time. They'll probably make the playoffs again next year with this roster. But
I don't know.
You look at him even with the Packers. Mike McCarthy with the Packers didn't, outside of a Super Bowl win, they didn't perform extremely great in the playoffs either.
Yeah. I don't see McCarthy lasting after this week, personally. If he's not fired by the end of the week, it would blow me away. I think Jerry's fed up with it. I think, basically everyone is fed up with McCarthy. I think he's gone.
I would be surprised as well, though it took Jason Garrett a few years past when he probably should have been fired. We know personally that was Jerry Jones trying to make Jason Garrett his Tom Landry, and maybe just looking past a few things for that reason, because they had talented teams as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be surprised too. He's got whether it's right or not. You could probably talk to 10 experts and find a couple of them that say no. You just got to hang in there with it. You could look at any Hall of Fame coach, and until they made that jump, until they made it over the hump, we thought the same thing. I mean, changing sports here, but we all thought Dirk Nowitzki was soft, and he's not going to do anything. He wins a championship, goes through that grind, and then now he's a legend here. You can't think of anything negative to say about Dirk Nowitzki, and to a point, and he only won one championship. But I think Mike McCarthy's at that point, and we talked about on another show that how much do you let the fans talk make that decision for you? Not that Jerry Jones is making his decision based on that.
Yeah.
But you lose some of that support, I think. I think you can get people more excited because this is arguably the with the path they probably would have had, the easiest path to the NFC Championship game of any year. I mean, you can say they've had a bye week and all they had to do is win one game, but this just set up with, like we said, the future matchup. You're playing the Packers, you should beat them. Every team that would most likely match up with you in the divisional round, you've already beaten this year. And not only do you not even make it to the divisional round, not only do you It's not even like a close game. Which that's what seems so odd. The Cowboys haven't got blown out in the playoffs. I mean, maybe against the Vikings. I don't even know what year that was when Romo was the quarterback against Favre. The Vikings kicked their ass, but they've never lost this bad at home in the playoffs. So, I mean, you have all this, and it's like you can, if this happened on the road, you could say, man, we were just a bad road team this year.
Yeah.
But you're the number one offense, 16 straight games at home. I mean, averaging 32 points a game. You did score 32 points, but but that's not really that's not reality. Great offense at home, and you just lay an egg. I can't even like the analogy of it looks like they threw the game is so because it's not you could say same old Cowboys, but this isn't the same old Cowboys. This loss was completely different. It wasn't like, man, y'all played pretty bad, stayed in it, and lost at the last second.
Yeah.
Like they have the last few years. They just got annihilated. I can't even tell you why. Whether it's the right mindset, the wrong mindset, wrong attitude, whatever. You can tell statistically, analytically, you say this is what happened. But why? Why did it happen? Why did it happen against this team?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, the Cowboys have such a short window. This was the window for them. This was the road to the NFC Championship looks so good. This was a short window for the Cowboys to do it. That you're going to have to start signing guys in a few years. McCarthy. This is why I don't think McCarthy sticks around or will be there. That Jerry will allow it. He's got it's got to win now. After next season, this team could look drastically different. Dak Prescott included, depending on if they do extend him, they don't extend him, and how that works out, what that cost is going to look like, what Dak's going to demand.
You're about to sign CeeDee Lamb,
yeah,
who's probably going to have be the highest paid wide receiver. Arguably, maybe the best wide receiver this year. I know Tyreek Hill had a little bit, his stats were slightly better. I know he did miss a game too. Micah Parsons, he's going to make, he's not going to make linebacker money. He's going to make defensive end money. He's probably going to break a record. It's not going to get any cheaper for you. And of course, Dak, you're having to extend him for this reason. And it happened, with Romo. You just kept pushing that money off. And then luckily you got a franchise quarterback. You couldn't really benefit from it as much as you like. Like, hey, you have a quarterback that's working for you on a rookie contract, but you're still paying for Romo and dead cap money.
Well,
and that's what it's going to have to come to, unless Dak restructures his contract to alleviate that. But that's, I don't think there's any way that happens.
Well, we've talked about McCarthy. We both agree, I think, that he should be gone, as many Cowboy fans do. Dak could still be the answer here. But the big question is, what do you do about Dan Quinn? Do you get rid of McCarthy, looking to move him in as the offensive?
No, not anymore.
Coming into this week, I was for it. Yes, let's get rid of McCarthy. Let's go ahead and get Quinn locked up because he's going to go. But after that last night's performance, I'm not so sold that Dan Quinn's what we want, man.
You have a lot of converging scenarios and different things happening right now. One, it's not a one-off because you saw a similar thing in Buffalo. If it was a subpar performance, even if they get blown out, I don't know it affects his stock very much because you can only really pick out a handful of games where you're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
But we live in a world as what have you done for me lately? And this sticks out so much. So you have that going on for you. And then I think Bill Belichick might be able to work here. It's not like fantasy football. It's not like you just plug it in and it works. But the fact that it's there, if there were no other options, like, well, who are you going to replace him with? He's usually like when you talk about Dak, who's going to be the quarterback then?
Yeah.
Because you're really just resetting. You just got lucky. I mean, you say lucky, people will say you got cursed with Romo and Dak back to back, but you had a franchise quarterback in Romo, and you just happened to luck in another franchise as Romo was deteriorating.
Yeah.
they forget that the years between Troy Aikman and Romo, where Vinny Testaverde, Brad Johnson, Chad Hutchinson, it wasn't pretty. And that was mainly, they had a lot of talent around that, but they didn't have the right quarterback. I mean, Quincy Carter took him to a playoff game. It took him to the playoffs one year. I think what's going to happen is Dan Quinn will still, there's going to be teams out there. I don't know that he's going to be the number one contender to sign as he has been the last couple of years, but he's probably just going to go away quietly, get his head coaching job, because now I don't think he's going to lose all those opportunities, but now in his mind, he's got to take it now that there's still opportunity. If he comes back next year, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure, with the right talent, he's still going to be a good coach. So I say you could be overreacting. I'm not saying it would be a travesty if you leave him here, but I think there needs to be a big overall, because there's clearly something different. The Cowboys have been a great regular season team for the last couple of decades. They haven't had a losing season since 2004 outside of the quarterback, Romo getting hurt a couple times and Dak getting hurt. Outside of your starting quarterback going down with the season-ending injury, they haven't had a losing season since 2005, I think it is, because Romo came in 2006. So they can win, but there's obviously something happening in the playoffs. The odds of them being talented and getting number one seeds and number two seeds and bye weeks and number one offenses and top defenses, the odds of not making it to an NFC championship or Super Bowl it's just ridiculous that they haven't. Something's wrong. And I'm not sure you'll actually be able to find it out, whether it's an environment thing. Maybe it's Jerry Jones. I don't know. Jerry Jones did win a few Super Bowls with Jimmy Johnson or a team that Jimmy Johnson built. But they obviously put talent together. But I think there just needs to be, there's a sense of urgency. You're about to have to just rip this down and build it back up.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, there's an urgency where you need to shake things up. And I think, if you're going to bring in a new coach, they probably want to bring in their own coaching staff anyways. I'm sure if they let McCarthy go, I'm sure they interview Dan Quinn for the job. Jerry Jones is kind of classy like that. I'm not going to, like, he didn't fire Jason Garrett, his contract just went up and he let him walk kind of thing. Like, no, I never fired Jason Garrett, which that's pretty much what, the same thing. So that's why I think Dan Quinn will be interviewed, but I think Dan Quinn will get more interviews and go away. I don't think, you just got to, rip off the Band-Aid, choose something. You obviously have the talent here, but the coaching staff, the game plan, whatever it is not working. And you're not going to be able to rip out players and put them back in. You have limitations to that. It's not hard. You pay coaches whatever you want. It doesn't go against the cap.
Well, what's missing from this team is an X factor, and I think that X factor is the coach, is a coach with experience.
It has to be. You have great defense. You have great. You have good. There's not one place you can think. Sure, their rush defense is not good. You can try to fix that through the draft or whatever. Maybe for agency if you can find something there. But every team is going to have a weakness somewhere. They have talent. They've won 12 games, 3 straight years, number one offense the last few years, great defenses. But yeah, I agree with you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So I'm not sure Bill Belichick's that X factor. Just like you said, that there's no guarantee that he plugs right into here. Just as we saw Sean Payton in Denver didn't plug right in and work right away.
Bill Belichick's,
we'll see a couple years in.
How many years does he even have anyways?
Yeah.
Then again, how many, what's your window anyways here too?
Yeah. I think the Cowboys, it's a win now situation. I think this team you maybe have a 2 to 3 year window here, and it's going to start costing a lot of money, and you're going to have a lot of big cap hits, and the dynamic of this team could quickly change. When we've seen it year after year, this defense may not be around to be this good. And
defenses never are. You've been really lucky to have the run you have had with the defense. And maybe we're, being a little over dramatic. Like if you leave McCarthy and Dan Quinn comes back, he's your defensive coordinator, you're probably winning 11, 12 wins, 12 games next year too. But again, is that satisfying to you?
Yeah.
That's, the bar's raised every year for the Cowboys. It's every year you don't make it to the NFC and now it's gotten this arbitrary line is make it to the NFC Championship game. Like that's just so weird. Like that's of course it's to win a Super Bowl, but that's what everybody say. Commentators will like that's a point. We need to make it back to the NFC Championship game because he hadn't been there in 27, 28, whatever how many years it is now.
Yeah, 28 years now, I think. Yeah,
that's your arbitrary line. Like you don't hear that with any other team. Like can they make a playoff run? Can they make the Super Bowl? Can the Chiefs make it to back to the AFC Championship? Can the Lions make it to the NFC? No, it's always the Cowboys because of that arbitrary line. And for better or worse, I mean, you can compare it to, like I said, Browns, Lions. Compare it to Jaguars. I mean, Jaguars have been to the AFC Championship game a couple of times since the Cowboys have been to the Conference Championship. But a lot of franchises don't get wins, don't get playoff appearances. The Cowboys get a lot. But it's not enough. You have to make it. When you have this talent, you may be fine. Most franchises might be fine. Like, hey, we made it to a Super Bowl. We lost, but we made it to a Super Bowl last decade.
Well, I mean, here's a wild stat, and you can pick and choose, things how you want to make stats look how you want. But since 2002, the Texans, which is when the Texans were established as a franchise, since 2002, the Texans have more playoff wins than the Dallas Cowboys do.
Yep.
That stat blows me away
because they don't even make the playoffs. That I know they had a little bit of run where they were a really good team, and I'm not knocking out the Texans at all, but that just goes back to my point when you have. I mean, not that the Cowboys have made a ton of playoff appearances. Really, I know they were kind of like every 3 years they'd make one, but they've been there 3 straight years, and you get one playoff win out of that. Yeah. You can't even back into a couple of crazy wins and make it to an NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they'll fit with the number 1 seed. Romo's done it a couple of times. Dak's rookie year, he did it. And they always do. They can't just win one game, let alone other ones. And it's I can't put my thumb on the reasoning. You can say, oh, it's just the Cowboys, but that's not that's not a real reason. Like if we weren't following the Cowboys as much as we were, if we were just some national whatever show just trying to cover a team and make fun of them, sure, that's a good, it's just the Cowboys, they choke in the playoffs. But why? Different teams, different coaches. Jerry Jones doesn't, he just happens to get talented players that happen to choke in the playoffs.
After this season, you're even more in disbelief and more in question. In other seasons past, you could almost pinpoint, okay, here was the problem, this was the problem. After this season's performance,
we could say, hey, man, they played a bad game. If they would have just played a decent game, they would have won. This isn't even – you can't point to, man, if Dak Prescott had one more second and he was able to spike the ball, I have confidence he could have thrown a touchdown to beat the 49ers a couple of years ago in that travesty. But, Dez caught it every time. But this one, they were supposed to win. Not that it was going to be a close game. It probably should have been. The Packers are a playoff team. Yeah. They're hot. They're hot. You're playing good teams. But I just wasn't, under the belief that they could only beat bad teams. I'm like, well, you play your schedule. You do what you do. You dominate the bad teams, play close against the good teams. And this just throws everything off. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if the Cowboys start out 6-7-0 next year. I'm like, I can't feel confident.
You still can't trust them.
Unless there's a completely different coaching staff, different scheme. Maybe you're like, okay, this is different, but not right now. I can't.
Well,
sorry, Jerry.
Our hearts go out to the Cowboy fans. We'll definitely keep an eye on the status of the coaching staff and how long Mike McCarthy sticks around. But the Cowboys out early. Hitting the off seasons now, looking to next season, and as all Cowboy fans would say, next year that's our year. That next year will be our year.
Not with this staff, but hey, next year's always going to. I mean, you have to go into that. That's how I'm going to go into it. Unless we're don't have a quarterback. That's what I'm thinking. Well, hey, we're going to win this year. Rangers are still World Series champions.
Yeah. We're going to stick with the Rangers, man. At least we got that one right. Until next time, guys, have a good day.